Hello again. I don't remember which number this one is. That's it. Anyway, to continue on, um, tower moments. Tower moments. This is a point in my life in which, and previously I had been talking about my college years, about the breaking away of my mother, breaking away from her. Um, my dad dying, and not dying, but having a grand mal stroke, all that. Um, Now I was living next door to my abuser and had just welcomed another abuser into my life, my future husband. And life didn't get better with him. I thought, finally I found love. I was really crazy in love with him. When I met my husband, the first time we met, we didn't notice each other. We didn't look at each other. I was in one part of the yard talking to somebody, and he was in another part of the yard talking to somebody else. And we literally just passed each other. But then the next time that we met, when I looked into his eyes and he looked into mine, there was recognition. There was that moment of, in the Hotel Transylvania, where she said the zing. I had a zing moment. There it was. There was that moment. That was a tower moment. It would be such a monumental part of my life, that moment, that I can't even explain it. But we had that zing moment. We went on a date. He had just broken up with his girlfriend of, like, I think it was 4 or 5 years. He'd been with her for He'd been with her for a while, and he was older than I was. He was like 6 years older than I am. And I just thought he was so funny, and I was just so in love with him. I fell insta love. It was the weirdest thing. It was such a deep thing. And it just swept me away. And honestly, when we were in sync, people would look at us like, wow, look at those two. What a couple. We were so happy. We were very lovey-dovey. But when he would go on benders, not drinking. He was more into meth and cocaine and pot. Sometimes I wouldn't see him for days. And he couldn't hold a job. No job was good enough for him. That was his thing. Oh, I'm just too good for this. I don't want to do that. That was the weirdest excuses. So I couldn't go back to college. I tried, but it just didn't work. I really tried, and it didn't work. I just kept making excuses for him. Just kept making excuses for him. Every time we would fight or something, he would get mad. I'm leaving you. I'm out of here. And then he'd go cheat on me. He'd go find somebody to have sex with. But I was so in love with him, and I was so, I was conditioned to live in that kind of lifestyle, to be in that dysfunctional lifestyle. And it just continued. The occasional slap, the verbal assaults, the demeaning comments. And I told you before, I was kind of a curvy girl. But I had finally gotten it under control. I'd lost weight. I worked out, but with him, after all I dealt with, and then him, he would forget anniversaries, he'd forget my birthday. Sometimes it was like he'd deliberately pick a fight on holidays, Valentine's Day, things like that. I can only remember like maybe 1 or 2 holidays out of the 6 years or 7 years. I think it was 7 years that we were together. Yeah, 7 years that we were, together. That he remembered, something nice for Valentine's Day. And we never had any money. I was always working. That's all I did was work. Work. Oh, here's another job. Here, have another job. I even would come at night just to spend time with him because I was working so much. I would go to his pizza delivery job and help him do that too. Um, it was just a nightmare. The nightmare continued. The cycle of abuse continued, and it was sad. And you know, it was just falling apart. I had gained a bunch of weight. He was making comments about my weight all the time, insulting me, degrading me. You know, and his family. Oh, sweet Jesus, his family. A whole family of narcissists. A whole family of angry individuals wanting to bitch slap everybody for just looking at them wrong. That's what I married into. That's why to this day I still don't have a relationship with them. I just can't. I can't be around that. Right now I'm in a spot where I have peace, where I can think. Yeah, it's nice. It's beautiful. Don't worry, my story will get better. Okay, my story will get better, but not for a long time. So anyway, I married into that. I married into dysfunctionality again, and that's kind of the psychology of it too. Is that a lot of times people will find other dysfunctional relationships to connect themselves with. Dysfunctional friends, dysfunctional relationships, everything. It's a mess. It really is. And that's what I married into. It was, oh my God, it was something else. But anyway, we continued on for 7 years. 5 years into the relationship, you know, and I was just getting sick of him cheating on me. I told him I was pregnant, and this was such a shock to me because at one point in time, I had got what we call dysplasia or something, that thing you get when you know, it leads to cancer, and I was a 4, borderline 5. 5 is cancer. It had gotten so bad, and I was starting to feel sick. I didn't know why. And the thing is that I had just had, you know, a checkup. You know, I went to my family doctor to have a pap smear done. And she didn't tell me. They didn't tell me something came back wrong. They didn't tell me for months. Months. Months I had this growing inside me. Months of not feeling well. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. No, it was not fine. I finally got a call like 5-6 months later after the initial visit and said, you need to go to the doctor now. I'm like, well, sure, it's not like coming back to you. And at the time, I was living with my husband. We hadn't gotten married yet. I was working at this awful bank. Jesus, that was awful. Let me tell you, corporate America sucks. Those people are the most anal, uptight, backstabbing people I've ever met in my life. Just, ugh, awful. But the insurance I had wasn't all that great. But I did manage to go. And he told me, he said, you know, if you don't get this taken care of now, it's going to get so much worse. You're at the stage where it's going to be cancerous. It's that bad. And that was devastating. So they went in there and they first did what you call just a removal. They just removed it, you know, which was very painful. They don't really give you any pain pills or anything. Because well, you can't feel anything anyway. I'm sorry, I felt it. It was so awful. The cramping. It was the cramping that did it, you know. Bleeding and cramping and just horrendous. And, you know, my husband was no help. It's not my fault. Well, yeah, it kind of was his fault. I ended up getting, chlamydia from him. From his previous relationship. It was awful. And that's what set it off. You know? That's what set it off. I mean, I had already got it treated and taken care of, but it disrupted everything. And then I ended up like that. No sympathy, no compassion, nothing. No compassion at all. Just, it's all your fault. And somehow this is all your fault, Now we have to pay for this, and da 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 da. And he wasn't even working, But we went through that, and that was devastating. Then I thought I was okay, and then it came back. It didn't go away. So then the second procedure was a freezing. They froze it out. But because of all that stress and damage down there, I ended up getting what you call little fibrous lumps or bumps in my uterus. And I was told, well, there's nowhere for the egg to hold on to. You're probably not ever going to get pregnant. You're probably never going to have children. And I was like, what? Part of me was like, well, that's okay. We really didn't want kids anyway. My husband didn't want kids. I wanted a baby. But then to have that told to me, there's another tower moment. It's bad enough that I had to go through all this with my family. No family. Now, I was never going to have a family of my own. I was never going to get to build a relationship, have my own little family. I was never going to have that. Never. And I didn't have the money for any kind of, in vitro fertilization or anything like that. And plus, my husband didn't want it anyway. He was happy. He was glad. And he still made me, and even after that, he's like, well, you still need to take birth control. We don't want to take any chances. And it's like, really? Because he had already he had lost a son with his previous girlfriend. He had a stepdaughter, which he called his own. And then he had another daughter with another woman. So he had his family. He had his kids. Screw me. And I didn't even know what to think or say. That was such a hard time for me. And I just I spiraled. Smoking more pot, spending money on pot that we didn't have. Or, he would go to places to find freebie drugs. Yeah, hey, you doing a line? You got a bowl? Can I bum a bowl? We don't have any money. Well, we would have money if you got a job. So, yeah, that was so hard for me. Being told that more than likely I would never have children. I would never get to have my own family. And, my husband was happy about it. He was an ass. He really was. He didn't have a lot of compassion or sympathy for me. He said he loved me. But is that really love? It's not. It's not. I was a useful idiot. I fell in love with somebody who just saw me as a meal ticket. He said he loved me, but saying you love somebody and actually showing it are two different things. I learned that the hard way. But I did learn it. Do I have to take a moment? So imagine my surprise when 5 years later, while on birth control, I had missed one dose. I had missed one dose right before I was due to ovulate. Those little white pills that you take that don't do anything. They're just there to remind you to take a pill. I got pregnant. And that didn't go over well. We were fighting and arguing, and I was trying to figure out how to tell him that I was pregnant. And I was working. God, I was working so much. I was working like 60 to 70 hours a week. Literally getting zero sleep, going from job to job to job to job. I was exhausted. And he, boy, we were just having a drag, all out fight. And I remember him shoving me hard. and I flew backwards, thankfully on the bed. And I freaked out and I said, "Oh my God, I'm pregnant. Don't touch me." And that was the worst way possible to tell someone that, we're going to have a baby. And he left me. He told me that I would never be anything. That I would be an ADC mom, 80 dependent children, that was what it was called then. Living off the state. I was worthless. And it probably wasn't even his kid. And that I was a slut and I was worthless. And I was fat and a tower moment. Another tower moment. And I lost it. I completely broke down. And I was like, I can't raise a child by myself. I can't do this alone. I just can't. And because when they told me I was pregnant, I'm like, "Are you sure? Maybe we should take this test again." And they're like, no, you're pregnant. Come back in and we'll confirm it. And I'm like, I don't want it. I don't want this baby. I can't have a baby. I don't have any support. How am I going to support this baby? What am I going to do? I was between a rock and a hard place. Being told I was never going to have kids, and then having a baby, being told I'm pregnant. My God, I fell to pieces. I had to take a week off of work because I was unfit. I had totally mentally collapsed. And I went in there. I finally went back to work, depressed, upset. And I was going to get rid of it. I was going to have an abortion. And I went in there to the clinic to have the pre-examination. And as they're doing the ultrasound, I look up there, and on the screen is this tiny, like about the size of a peanut, maybe. I was about like 8 weeks along. And in the middle of that peanut, there was this little boop, 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 boop. And I'm like, "What is that?" And she said, "That's your baby." And I'm like, no, what, that thing, that flash of light, that little p. And she said, "Well, that's your baby's heart." Tower moment. I froze. I totally and completely froze. There was a living being inside of me, and it had a heart, and it was beating. And right then and there, I'm like, no. This might be my only chance to ever have a child. I may not fuck it up. I may not have a clue what I'm doing. But I'm doing this. I am doing this. And I said, never mind, I'm not going to go through with the abortion. Just set me up with an OB/GYN and we'll take it from there. And I decided to keep my baby. Best decision ever. Now, I'm not saying that that's the best decision for all people. You hear stories about women who didn't abort their children, who kept them, even though they wanted to. They ended up killing their own children. Just doing the most awful things. It's suffering, those children. I'm not a pro-lifer. But I would never do that. I don't believe in it at all. But I also don't believe that, take away somebody's choice. We all have to make our own decisions. But remember, we also have to live with those decisions. And I wasn't willing to live with the decision of killing my baby. I wasn't. But, come what may, I was going to go down that road of having a baby. Regardless of my husband. Regardless of what he wanted. Regardless of what he said. I didn't care anymore. He wasn't going to steal my joy. He wasn't going to take away this one chance that I had to have a family. Okay. It's almost 20 minutes long. And like I said, I'm trying to keep these at a certain length. But I'll see you in the next video. Love, peace, and blessings to you all. May you find hope and strength in all that you see and all that you hear from me. I hope this helps somebody. I really do. See you in the next one.